Hi everyone, welcome to the first of our videos. We are Luna Dive. My name's Ellie.
And I'm Lucy.
Today we're going to be talking about the experience of scuba diving. For lots of people, scuba diving is something that you might have heard of or you're aware of, but maybe you have never thought of trying it, or you have thought about it, but the thought scares you a little bit. So we've had some questions through from friends of ours and from followers in the Luna community that we wanted to answer and really address just what the emotions and feelings are of scuba diving, just to kind of start you on your scuba diving education. So Lucy, I guess the first question I'll ask for you is, what does scuba diving feel like?
I guess the closest thing that you can describe it to, which is strange because no human's ever done this, is flying. And I don't know if anyone's ever had like a lucid dream, but I've had a few lucid dreams where I'm flying in the dream. And I have to say that is what scuba diving feels like, because it's not like when you're on land where you can literally just go forwards, backwards, left or right. When you're underwater, you can go up, down, diagonally, all over. You can move in a sphere. And so because of that, it's super freeing. It's just, yeah, you just feel almost like a little spaceship floating about.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of describing it. Like there's no lateral direction to it the way that you would have on land. And I think it can seem from like an outsider's point of view to be quite a clunky sport. You've got this big cylinder on your back and you've got all this equipment that makes it look like it would get in the way and become really cumbersome. But as soon as you get in the water, it just you feel weightless. You are neutrally buoyant. You're just floating in the water with no real pressure on you either which way. And I think that kind of lends to like questions that I've had of like, can you feel the force of the water on you? And the answer is no. Like you don't feel the pressure of the water, like the heaviness of it. You feel light and like you're able to float around anywhere. And it's such a, like you say, freeing experience to be able to do that.
It is. It's super relaxing. I know lots of people that just absolutely switch off, and anyone who does any sort of sport or craft or anything that takes you out of your headspace and all you're doing is focusing on that one thing is so good for you, because all you're focusing on when you're diving is looking at the coral, looking at the fish, making sure your buoyancy is correct.
Lots of, especially like during lockdown, like everyone's been practicing to be more mindful and learning to be more present, like not really knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, like you say, like thinking about tomorrow or thinking ahead, just being more aware of what's happening in the right now. And I find that diving really forces you to do that. That paired with like just the sound, I think like the sound of the bubbles around you, like it's just like and like the sound of your own breath in your equipment, I find that like a really relaxing rhythm to hear as you're in the water as well. So obviously I think as a whole, as a beginner especially, there's so much wonder and like calm about it. It's really special.
And there is just something about being in water or near water. It's such a healing place.
The second question that we get asked quite a lot is like what kind of things you see underwater and, you know, what creatures you can experience. So just like there's so many options, aren't there? Of it's such an open-ended question of like, what can you see?
You and we just love diving. So if we deliberately go to a certain place and go to see something, might be a little bit let down that we didn't see XYZ, but we might have seen a really cool little sea slug or a really cool shrimp mating or something that we've never seen before that actually excites us in a completely different way. I remember one of the dives we did in Mexico, and it just looked like a real sandy bottom, and then we realised that all the lines that we'd could see were the tracks of hermit crabs that were living inside conch shells, and they'd all made these grids and they were all sat almost like in a perfect grid pattern, but you wouldn't notice that if you weren't looking for it. We get asked a lot, does scuba diving feel claustrophobic? So
I think that equipment as well as surroundings can be like one of the biggest things that play into that feeling.
Well, usually that's what people feel claustrophobic with, is having that feeling of something on your face and feeling enclosed that way. And I think it's also the bubbles in your face when you're breathing. anyone that has felt that when they were learning would always say that actually then they get over it and they get past it. Their trainer will help them get past it, help explain methods, and then you just get used to the feeling, and then you carry on diving, and then you sort of forget about it because you're looking at all the wonderful creatures underwater.
I think a lot of it is distraction as well. I think the first time you put on a mask, which can also like cut away your peripheral vision, which can also be a little bit surprising because you're so used to having such a wide field of vision normally, to then have like it almost like boxed off, and then to only have the option to breathe through your mouth, which is obviously quite an alien thing really unless you've got a cold. It can feel quite restrictive in like your view and your breathing, and you've just got equipment like strapped to your face, and usually it's just like free and easy. And yeah, I think like once you're in the water diving, you know, able to be distracted by fish and, you know, signing things to your buddy, I think it's quite easy to forget that quite quickly.
A good tip for the feeling of being boxed in with your mask is to, particularly if you're learning, and you might feel like claustrophobic in that sense, is to get a mask with the clear silicone and a clear frame.
Yeah.
Or a light coloured frame. Yeah. So light can come through the edges. Because then you don't feel it as much, and you don't feel like you've got tunnel vision as much.
I guess that's the people that might be learning and might not have their own equipment, then it might be a good idea for you before you get in the water to just go to the dive shop and try on a few of the masks. If you know they don't have any with clear sides, is there one that fits you that feels really comfortable, and you might be able to just wear it in the kit room for like a few minutes to just kind of get the feel of it before you're then told to put it on in the water. Or you might choose to buy a mask before you start diving, just to know that you won't have that barrier in your head to get over. But yeah, it's a great tip. Like if you don't feel comfortable in your equipment, you know, asking someone to change it. You should never feel that your wetsuit is too tight, that your dive jacket, your BCD is too tight, because that can also, like that restriction on land, you know, you might not be able to, that might not ease underwater, and that might make you feel further uncomfortable. So that gearing up process is really important, and that's something that we'll be talking about in our equipment discussion that we'll have in a week or so, is just about, you know, understanding what the equipment is, how it should feel on your body, how to ask for the right equipment, and how to, you know, request different equipment when you're gearing up. Perhaps you've not, you know, been scuba diving before, you might not know what it should feel like, what it should look like. I guess going on from that question, one of my friends asked me, like, what happens if you panic underwater? And I don't know about you, but like I've, you know, later in my diving career, I still have moments where I can feel a bit nervous, either before a dive or during a dive. And I know I have some coping techniques that I use, but I was wondering if you have anything that you use for, like, if you feel panicked or you feel uncertain underwater.
I think it's almost like reframing the question, not what happens if you panic underwater. It's how do I prepare so that I don't panic underwater?
Yeah, I would probably say that for beginners learning to dive, it's completely normal to feel anxious in the water, if that is a feeling that you're having. I've been diving with an instructor as a buddy, and she had a panic underwater. So it doesn't really matter how long you've been diving, how many dives you've done. Anyone of any level can feel nervous and can feel panicked underwater. It's okay to be not okay. So one is like the planning and just making sure that the briefing is thorough and that you feel comfortable with the briefing of the dive and what you're going to be doing. But I'd say the second one is also just remembering your communication. So remembering that, like, if you're feeling worried or unhappy or panicked, to just tell someone immediately, be it your buddy, anyone else that's in your dive group, any other diver that happens to be on the dive site, the dive leader, just letting them know that you're having a problem. This is the sign for I'm having a problem. And straight away just communicating that, because it's not something that you have to do by yourself. Diving is not a solo sport. Diving is a sport that you enjoy with so many other people. And it's important to know that those people are there for you if you're having a great time or if you're not having a great time as well.
With scuba diving training, you learn drills and you learn processes of doing things, basically how to dive. and you do it and you do it and you do it and you do it, so that when you are diving and when you're out there on your own, like, you know, you're not in a training experience, you're out there doing a fun dive, if a problem occurs, you know how to deal with it before it becomes a situation that would cause you to panic.
Something that I definitely do before a lot of dives is I do a visualization practice. I basically see myself on the boat, getting my equipment on, getting into the water, taking my last breath on the surface, descending, taking my first breath under the water, and then I see myself starting the dive, and I basically rehearse that dive again and again as many times as I need to make me feel comfortable and confident that I'm going to go into the dive and just feel like I know what I'm doing, because in my mind I've already done it.
Yeah, I think it's almost knowing what works for you. So if you're someone who likes to ask questions and just really get all of your questions answered basically before a dive that you might be a little bit more nervous about or are unsure about, then do that. Or it might be, you know, looking at the dive site map, and really looking at the route and looking at how the dive will work. It could be, I love the idea of visualizations, that's great. So yeah, it's just, you know, knowing what works for you and practicing that, and also maybe trying new things.
I guess, are there any parting thoughts that we wanted to share about what it feels like to dive, I guess?
I think the main thing for me that I always say is that it's like being in a different world.
Yeah.
Even though you're on planet Earth still, it's so different to terrestrial life. Even down to how the wildlife lets you get so much closer than anything on land does.
It's crazy that we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about our own oceans. And like, for me, I just feel so lucky to be able to dive and to see that every time I go scuba diving.
You're right, it's that wonderment, and it always comes back to that sense of wonderment. It's just, like you say, it's just so undiscovered in so many ways by the average person. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's making me want to go diving.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I guess, like, for anyone that perhaps is watching that, you know, after hearing us, isn't completely scared off, but instead is, you know, has that sense of wonder and really wants to give it a go, I would say do a try dive. Like, book yourself into a try dive, you know, speak to us, we can help organise try dives for you, like women only to try dives, if perhaps that feels a bit more accessible to you or less scary. I think it's worth like 2 hours of your time to give it a go, and just to see if you can experience that underwater world with us. Okay, so we'll be talking about a few other cool things in the next couple of weeks, so equipment and also like the practicals of learning to dive and dive courses and that kind of thing. But that's it for today. Thank you. Bye.